Without actually realizing it, a lot of people naturally use something that scientists refer to as parent tease. And parent tease is that high-pitched, excited voice you use when you talk to your baby, because without realizing it, we know that that's what our babies tune into. They're specifically primed to listen to that voice. Now, it's very important that you talk to your baby for several reasons. But the very first is that it actually fine-tunes their ears. So initially, when you hear them babbling and you hear them making noises, they're actually able to make all the noises humanly possible and in all languages and cultures. But as the more they listen to you speak, the more their ears will specifically tune into the sounds of your language, and they start dropping those other sounds out of their repertoire and out of the neural pathway. It also builds their vocabulary, which is essential, we know, for later cognitive development and for academic performance. And then also, you know, there's so much more to language than the actual words that we use. We might not realize it, but we use a specific rhythm when we talk. Our voice goes up at the end of a question. And very often when you listen to little babies, you'll hear that before they have words, they use that rhythm and they use that pitch. And it's also about that serve and return interaction. So you'll often find that your baby will babble and wait for you to say something and babble back. So they're learning those social rules and the interaction of I say something and then you say something back. Now, very important for those early pathways for developing language is that those become the skills that later on we build reading. And upon those reading skills, we can build all future knowledge going forward. So essentially, language is one of the most important building blocks. A very interesting research study has actually shown that children from talkative families hear something like 30 million more words than babies who are born in families that don't talk to them all that often. And connected to that is the concept, the same study found, that the more children have heard by the age of 3, the better their cognitive development and academic performance going forward. It also happens, without us realizing it, language is not just about the words, like I said before, it's about that social interaction. So it helps us to build healthy relationships. It helps your children with their social skills later on, which contributes to EQ. It just has tons of benefits. So how do you do it? How do you talk to your little one? Firstly, very interestingly, we know that it's the interaction that actually matters. So if you were to place your little one in front of a television screen with exactly the same content that you would talk about, exactly the same vocabulary, the research shows that they actually won't pick that up because they're not primed for it. They're specifically primed to tune into you. When your baby is born, they're primed to look at your face, to tune into your voice, and that is essentially how they learn. And there's no magical formula. There's nothing that you can do right or wrong. Talk to your baby, imitate their facial expressions. When they babble, babble back to them, imitate what they're saying and doing. Ask them questions. Why is your nappy so dirty? Or what's happening in this room? Explain to them what you're doing step by step while you're bathing them, while you're cooking, for instance. Sing to them, read to them. Very, very important. And then also, you might even be having a conversation with somebody else, but you can always draw your baby into that. If you're speaking to your partner, for instance, you can see, oh, you won't believe what Lukey did today, and just to get them into the conversation as well. The second very important building block is play. Now again, it all comes down to that interaction. Toys are massively important, but essentially they're just tools. You are your baby's favorite toy at the moment, and so most of the learning will happen through their interaction with you. And remember that the whole world is new to your baby. They don't know what anything is. So something as simple like a Tupperware lid or a sock will be just as exciting as a new toy. They won't know the difference. Your baby's favorite toy, like I said, is you, and you can play lots of games with them. But before I get into the specific games, and I'm just going to mention a few, but before we get into that, it's essential that you remember a few things. The first is that repetition is very, very important. It might be very boring for you, but the more times you do something, the better those neural pathways become in the brain, and the more easily your baby will be able to perform those tasks as they get older. Also remember that they have a very short attention span, so you might only be able to occupy them and keep them busy for a little bit, and then look out for cues of them getting bored, irritated, grumpy. If they start looking away from you, they might be a little bit overwhelmed, and just give them a bit of space, have them do something, a quieter activity, just to calm down a little bit. And the most important thing is that safety first. Whatever you decide to do with your baby, whatever games you want to play, make sure that it's safe and that they can't hurt themselves. Some of the things we want to do, everything, like I said, is new to your baby. So those senses are going to be just taking in everything. And the more senses that you can engage while you're busy with your baby, the better. Multi-sensory experience, we know, if your baby sees, hears, and smells an item, all of those senses just help to build a much stronger pathway than when they only use one of their senses. Also remember that your baby is nearsighted, so if you have something that's too far away or something with very light colors, they won't be able to see it. Try not to overwhelm their senses, so nothing that's too loud or too rough on their sensitive little skins, and be specifically careful with tastes. Babies can only use and handle very, very subtle tastes at the moment. I wanted to just quickly focus on mouthing because it's something that comes up quite often in my practice. Mums get very easily distressed and they'll say that the baby's putting everything into their mouths and they might hurt themselves and they're worried that they might choke. So a lot of moms will try and keep things out of the baby's mouth. But mouthing is not just about taste. Quite often, your baby actually uses his mouth because those gums and the lips and the tongue is one of the most sensitive sort of organs at the moment. So they use that to distinguish shapes, textures, all those different things about objects. One of the things that you can do that's brilliant is dancing with your baby. Because they can't move at the moment, they are going to need to move along with you. And dancing with your baby just helps to develop that proprioceptive sense. Now, proprioception is the sort of feeling of where you are in space, getting an idea of what's around you and where you are. And very important as well is that you don't want to overwhelm them. So initially you just want to make small rocking movements, and as your baby grows you can become more boisterous and jump them up and down and all the big movements. Have them explore everything that you can, and you can draw their attention to something by saying, "Look, Luke, see what this is. It's a bell or a ball or something." One of my favorite ideas is to actually get just a simple woven basket or a small plastic basket, and you can actually put objects in there for them to explore. Everyday objects, things like a pine cone, a ball, a piece of ribbon, and have them play with those, feel them, touch them, mouth them. And you might want to not put too many different things into the basket initially. You could rather just put in up to 3 or 4 items in the basket, but then change that, say, every 2 or 3 days or so they get to explore something new. Tummy time is massively important. I know a lot of kiddies don't like it, but when you place a baby on their tummy, they're immediately forced to lift up their hands, and that strengthens not only the neck, but also the shoulder girdle eventually, so that we get to crawling and movement, which is very, very important. Another classic, absolute classic, is peekaboo. One of my absolutely favorite games. You can't go wrong. And we know that peekaboo is important for 2 reasons. Again, like I said, your baby is primed for interacting with you, so they're wanting to see your face and study your face. But the second thing about that is that we know very little children don't have an idea of object permanence. So if they can't see an object, they don't know that it continues to exist. And when we play peekaboo, that's a nice way to start showing your child that even though you might not be able to see you, you're still there, you still exist. And that often helps a little bit with separation anxiety as they get slightly older. Imitation is very important, and it's one of the easiest ones. Imitate everything your baby is doing. Encourage them to imitate you. Because without realizing it, imitation actually builds those neural pathways for a lot of the practical things that we do on a daily basis. You'll see little ones imitating things like putting on lipstick or talking on the phone or carrying a baby. And later on, those become important for practical skills and even social skills as they watch you interact with other people. The last building block I want to discuss is praise. Praise has gotten a lot of media attention lately, and so a lot of parents feel a little unsure about how do you praise, what do we do, what is okay, what's not okay. To be honest, I think we're completely overthinking it. Praise is a very natural reaction. When somebody does something that you're impressed with, you naturally praise them. So go with instinct mostly on them. But there are a few things that I think is quite important to note. So we know that praise specifically works because if you look at neuroplasticity and how the brain changes, one of the most important things to enforce that change is motivation, and timely motivation. So the sooner after the event the praise happens, the better that change is consolidated and it stays. Very important as well that your baby is not going to really understand the words that you use, so it's more about your facial expression and when you're excited about what they're doing that they're going to see. And what is the most important, I think, about praise is that you're sincere in your praise. The moment that we start praising children for something that they do with ease or something that hasn't taken a lot of effort, they very quickly start understanding that perhaps there's another motivation for your praise, and that can have the opposite effect. They start thinking, maybe this is false, maybe I'm not doing quite as well, why am I getting all of this praise? Or, unfortunately, sometimes it might lead them to this inflated sense of kind of self-esteem that I can do all of this and I'm so good at all of this. And unfortunately, if praise has been false throughout their sort of early years, when they get to school and they might not be getting exactly the same praise, we find again that that has a very big knock on the self-esteem. So make sure that your praise is warranted. And lastly, make sure that you praise the effort. It's not so much about what your child is getting right, but what he's trying to do. So along with praise, a lot of encouragement, a lot of, I know you can do this, or you tried so hard, well done. So in the end of the day, even if you just do those three things, play with your baby, talk to them a lot, encourage all the things that they do, that is essentially what's going to build their brains.